Everybody, let's jump into some predicates, to a whole predicate video, and knock out the I's. So we're going to start with is. I'm going to delete that. So is takes a function that takes anything and returns an object of anything, and then it takes an A and returns a Boolean. Let's figure out what these are. So what is that? The CTOR constructor? Yeah, I've never seen that abbreviation. So this takes a constructor and a value and returns a Boolean. It's interesting that they say it takes a constructor. We see if an object, i.e., a value, is an instance of the supply constructor. Huh. The function will check up the inheritance chain, if any, if value is created using object.create or is object value equals true. That is not a complete sentence. If value is creating using object.create, oh, I see. If value is created using object.create, r dot is object value equals true. Um, this is not what I thought it was when I looked at it a little bit. I thought this was basically an alias for object.is, but there must be a different function that does that. So this is seeing if this is an instance of a supply constructor. Okay, it's all right. So let's look at their examples here. Thinking I just grab them all. What I'll do is I'll just do a log here and I'll just drag them one by one in here so we can run it. Sing is object. Why is that throwing an error? I get, can I not use a semicolon in a log? Yes, I can't. Weird, I didn't know that. Anyway, it's true. So what we're saying is the value, which is this object, an instance of the supply constructor. So, like, is this an instance of object? And it is. It's just like we could use object.create, but nobody ever does that. We just use the object literal, right? So that makes sense. Let me get rid of these semicolons. Yeah. Does the number one an instance of the number object or the number constructor? And that is true. But is it an instance of object, the object constructor? And get rid of these. We don't want to spoil the answer, right? So is one an instance of the object constructor? And no, it's a number. So it's false. What about the lowercase s? Is that part of a string constructor? It is. So I don't really know when you want to use this in your daily stuff, but yeah, I mean, yeah, for like type guards or not type guards, but yeah, guards in your function. Like you want to return or do something else depending on what type you get. So if you're making like polymorphic functions, uh, and you need to check what the type of value is to decide what implementation you want to do, you could use this is function. So I wonder what the built-in way to do that, like instance of, I think it would be the instance of keyword. Let's try that. First of all, I forgot where we are. So let's clear that and run this. And S is an instance, or S is string, I guess. So we can we say comment that out. Instance of string. It's not an instance of, but it's saying is an instance of the supply constructor. You have to do that. Oh, I think it's I think you do it like that. No, you don't do it like that. Yeah, no, you don't do it like that either. Yeah, I don't know. Um, but we don't have to now. We can just use this, right? We get true. Maybe I was trying to do something like this one. Those, oh, yeah. So it's the string constructor the same as, or an instance of the, if we called a new string and passed it an empty string? Honestly, I don't know. It is true. I see. And then if we check this one, same thing, but we're checking if it's an instance of object instead of an instance of string. And like everything is an instance of object, right? Because like in JavaScript, everything's an object, mostly sort of. And that's true as well. So the new string is an instance of an object, but that should be false. I think what I just said, though, makes me think that maybe it is. No, it's false. Okay. My initial intuition was correct. So this comes down to, and all of these functions we're going to look at in this video come down to the fact that when you compare things like types, basically types in JavaScript are ridiculous. Like what equals what doesn't make any sense, or if it does, it's beyond me, and we just have to memorize them. And we get a lot of type errors, especially at runtime, because of this. Um, so did I run that one? Yeah, we get false, and then is number an instance of the object? I'm going to guess no. Or is the object an instance of number, I should say, and I still think no. And we get false, right? So yeah, what are we looking at? So it's a type function, which I haven't seen too many of those. We take a context, or no, we take a constructor and we take a value, and we return it the value as an instance of the constructor. So did I do it in the wrong order? What I said is an S, an instance of the constructor string. I get false. Do I have to say like a new string? No, no, I think I'm going back in circles. But that's what they're doing. They're returning it the value as the instance of it of the constructor, or if the value is not equal to null and the value dot constructor equals the constructor. or some other case. Yeah, I don't know. Uh, but if I was actually coding and I needed to try to do this and it didn't work, then maybe I would just think that it wasn't. So I'm glad this is function exists. However, I still just don't find myself using this so much, but that's okay. That's just me, and the stuff that I do or have been doing. Now that I've said that, I'll probably have the use for it like today. Some client will ask for something. Um, yeah, so that's is. And we're going to move on to is empty. I'm going to clear out this nasty error and get rid of that. And this is a logic function, still returns a Boolean. Look at the type signature. It takes a thing and returns true or false. Takes an X, returns a Boolean. One of the first functions that was implemented in Ramda in the first version. It returns true if the given value is its type's empty value, false otherwise. So its type's empty value. So that's a thing. Every type has a concept of an empty value. An empty array would be the empty value for the array type. An empty object would be the empty one. An empty string for the string. Zero for a number. False for a Boolean. And I don't know about a symbol. And undefined and null, I don't really know if that counts either. Um, but it does. Yeah, so null is empty because we're looking here. So again, I think we're not going to do much better with coming up with our own examples. So let's just use theirs because they're pretty thorough. I noticed when I pasted in this time, it removed the semicolons at the end. Remove that and this. Yeah, right. So is this array empty? And so it's asking, an empty array is an array with no elements in it. It would just look like that, or even array, like a new array, like that. And no, it's not. It's got numbers in it, so it's not empty. So we get false, right? Now, what's interesting is if we manually check this out and said, but I mean, actually, now there is an array. No, there's not an empty array function, so or method built into arrays. But if we checked if 1, 2, 3 equals a triple array, I guess we need parentheses. Oh, and then into expression. That's going to give us false as well. But even if it was an empty array, it doesn't like that. Maybe I need parentheses that. Yeah, it likes that. That's still false. But if we did r dot equals, because the Ramda's equals function works the way we would think that it should work, and then we passed it to empty arrays, that should be true. And it is, right? But that's just a side note. So yeah, this is actually pretty useful because otherwise, what do you have to do? You have to check if the value is an array first. So you could use array dot is array. and pass the thing in that. And then once you know it's an array, you could say, is the array dot length greater than zero? And then that would tell you. But then you've got to do two things. This is just, is it empty? It's very easy to understand what you're doing just by the name of the function. Like the function is its own documentation. So we've done that one. Uh, is this empty? This should be true, and it is. So the empty value for a string is the empty string. That's true. And then this one I couldn't understand because like null is always empty. That's what null is. Or what would JavaScript do? How would you even check? Yeah, I'm not sure. So, but this is well, that's weird. Is empty is false? Null. Is it because null is an object? Let's do like the type of null. Type of null is an object. But if we say is empty object, that's true. So that's weird. Um, but null is not empty. Yeah, see, null is just so weird. There's null and undefined, and then there's programming languages like Haskell and Rust, where there is no undefined or null. Um, you return instead of throwing an error in those languages, you return an error, return a value, and the value is an error. It's a little different, a lot different, really. Um, and in those languages, you can have errors, but they happen at compile time, or your code editor is going to give you red squigglies even before you try to compile it. And those languages actually give you super useful error messages. At least Rust does. Um, yeah, but JavaScript, we've got these two empty, or like these two bottom values, null and undefined, and then there's not a number, which is not the same, but a little bit related. So it's nice to have this just to simplify it. And, if you want to know if something's empty, you can check it out. An object with a length of zero should be empty because an array with no items in it is still an object with no objects. And this is saying, it would still be if I made an array with no items in it and I looked at the array in a console where it would show it. I don't think it'll work here. Let me just look real quick because I'm stuttering here. If I just did console log this array, this empty array, yeah, it just gives me an empty array. If I did like two string, maybe it would do what I want. No. Um, but we've all seen it in like a browser console. In fact, we could do it here. It's gonna be a little ugly. This at the bottom. Go to our console. And if I made an array, just call it ARR and set it to an empty array. No, it's not showing me. What I was wanting to see is like if I made an array two and put two items in it, and then I do that and I open it up, we've got the two array items, but we also have this length property, right? And so here, that's the same as making an object and providing the length property of zero. That's essentially doing the same thing as making an empty array. So if I'm gonna guess that this is an empty object, or yeah, is empty should be true. I hope I'm right. I don't save. I didn't save it. Yeah. So is empty is false. So after all that, I was wrong. So an object with a length property of zero, I guess it's because there is a property in there. So it's not false because there is a property. It's just not, and it is like the array that I was talking about. Like if I do this, I could loop through this, I think. Now I want to check that out. If I did an object with a length property of zero, wait, what am I doing? Length property of zero, and then I map over that and just do the art identity. See, we found a use case for that. That should still work, I think. It doesn't. No. Intermediate value. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It will let you do this in Svelte. If anybody's used Svelte, if you're trying to use the each uh, template thing where you can like loop through to a for each through an array in your HTML section, and you just want to loop like three times, you could do this and it will allow you to map over it. Maybe that's Svelte specific. Let me try to see if I can do this without, doing length zero. I'm doing length of three. Will that work? I'm guessing no this time. Yeah, that won't work. It's intermediate value. It's not a function. Yeah. Uh, just to make sure it's not a syntax thing. Let me do it like that. Yeah, that won't work. Okay. Well, I'm learning stuff. And again, it's just hard to know what's equal to what and what's considered empty or not in JavaScript because it's so all over the place. Just look at these other ones. The uint8 array, which is something that I doubt any of us have used, from an empty string. I'm not even going to guess at this point. I was wrong on all my other guesses lately. Yeah, so that's true. Yeah, because I mean, otherwise it's just making an array, even though it's a uint8 array. It's still an empty string. So we're just making an array of no values. And then we got these guys, a new set with nothing in it. So this is how you can remove duplicate numbers. If you provided an array of like 1, 1, 1, it should give you back an array with one, right? A set with one item, and that item is one. So it's a handy way to remove duplicates. And there's all these instance methods that we talked about, like intersection and difference and union, inner join, there's maybe an outer join. I don't know. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to see if an empty set is empty. I'm going to guess yes, but I'm wrong. So it is false. Wonder why that is. Oh, we're down here. New set. Wait a second. That's true. Am I not saving it again? That's interesting. Arda is empty. A new set is false, but they said it's true. Did I just find a bug? What about map? They say it's true, but it's false. That's interesting. Is there a bug, or am I just doing something wrong? Super interesting, guys. I'm gonna have to maybe dig into that. Bugs happen. Maybe they changed it and then forgot to update the documentation. Possible. Yeah, maybe their tests don't get it. Okay. Might be interesting to look at how they implemented this. Very simple. They're saying if x does not equal null, because if it does, I'm not even going to guess. If x doesn't equal null and x equals empty x, now we got to go and look at empty again, just to review. Then it's empty. So that's the definition of empty. And remember, their equals is different than the triple equals. So let's go look at empty again, even though we've looked at it in the original series. Chris looked at it. Um, Returns the empty value of its argument type. Ramda defines the empty value. Oh, it's not a Boolean. It returns the empty value. So if you put in, well, this gets into like using a monad, like a maybe type. But if you pass in the empty value of just 42, the empty value is nothing. That's not going to make any sense unless you've looked at maybes. But the empty version of an array is an array. The empty version of a string is an empty string. Empty version of an object with stuff in it is an empty object. Um, the empty version of a set is just a set with no items in it, right? So, you can use this for validation and say, like, is something blah 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 true? If not, just give us back an empty thing of the same type, so that if we then use that value again, it's still going to receive the same type, versus like undefined or null. So like let's say we have something where an array has to have four things in it, and then at least, and we check if the length of that something is four, like is equal to or greater than four, then that's fine. We pass that. But else, we're just going to return an empty array, because otherwise it's going to null or undefined. And if we don't check for that, it'll crash. So yeah, that's pretty handy. But let's go back to is empty, and that's what we get. And then there's is not empty, which we're going to look at in just a minute. So we'll get back to that. So let's check out is nil. Um, is nil takes anything and returns a Boolean. The value to test and returns true if x is undefined or null, otherwise false. This one's very useful. Um, in JavaScript, in the beginning, we had like this three equals to three, double equals. And what it does is it's going to first coerce both values into the same type. In this case, it's going to uh, uh, coerce them both to numbers, and then check if those numbers are equal. And so this would give us true. But if we triple equaled it, it does not coerce the values first. It just checks if the values are the same in terms of the value and the type. And the number three is not equal to the string three. So we get false. Um, so since the triple equals came out, the general rule of thumb that I've used and that I've heard other people suggest is to always use triple equals, except when you want to find out if something is either undefined or null. Because in most situations, if you're checking if something is undefined, you want to do something different. But if it's null, you want to do the same thing that's different. Like very few use cases when you care if it's actually undefined or actually null, just one of the two. And then so you would have to say if three, you know, if three is what's that here? If three, oh, let's just say is so if three is null, or I think I have to do the parentheses like this, or if no, sorry, or if three is equal to undefined, and then do your business based on that. And I was wrong. The parentheses like that, right? So this way we could check that, but we can make this a lot simpler and just say if x is double equals to, and then just either one, null or undefined. Null is shorter, so I'll use null. So Ramda has solved this problem by giving you a function called isNill, and I guess we're going to need a value. Let's say x, right? And then we need to pass x. Oh, I need to do let because I'm not assigning it. And I need to do r dot is nil. Yeah, and true is nil. If I set it to undefined manually, we're still going to get the same result. I checked it to null or changed it to null and do this. And then we don't need any, we don't need to do two checks, and we don't need to hack it by just checking with the double equals. This way, if you use isNill anytime you wanted to check a coerced value, like where you would use double equals, you could just use the function instead, and then you just do away with the double equals operator for good. So I think it's pretty useful. Um, yeah. So again, we could make this function ourselves by saying is nil, and then take an x, and then say if x is triple equals to undefined, or x is triple equals to null, and then call that, and we get true. But if we just said if x is equal to undefined triple equals, we're going to get boss, right? So yeah, just so you don't have to write that function again. And then so we have is not empty and is not null. Those are our last two. We're going to check those out real quick and finish up the eyes. And you should be able to guess. Now, it's interesting. This one I just noticed is came out in 0.292, but is empty was added in the very first version. Somebody, I guess, came up with the reason for why the negative, like the inverted version of is empty needed to exist. Same signature takes A, returns Boolean. Oh, but this takes, oh yeah, and this takes anything, returns a Boolean. This is the same, A returns a Boolean, and anything that takes a Boolean. So same function. And it just inverts it. Returns false if the given value is its type. Like returns false if the given value is its type's empty value, true otherwise. So I'm not even going to go through code examples of these two because it's just the opposite. Anything here that says true could be false if we used is empty and vice versa. And is not null checks if the input value is not null and not undefined. Not This one says null or undefined. This one says not null and not undefined. So the inverse of what am I trying to say? The inverse of or is and. The inverse of and is or. Those are the two opposites of each other. So yeah, that's all I think I want to say about that. I want to look at the implementation of this real quick. Yeah, all they're doing is sticking the exclamation mark in front of is nil. So that leads me back to saying, like, they added this in version 29. I don't know why it's so difficult just to put the exclamation point in there. But again, Ramda redefines or it makes functions for all the operators. Like we get the add function and the subtract function and the multiply function. Those are all implemented in JavaScript as operators. So why not add another function to reduce the amount of operators we need? So again, in functional programming, you can really ignore a lot of keywords, and you can also use functions instead of operators if and when you want to. So that's the end of the eyes. That's another milestone. There's only two functions in the J's. Join is something we're probably are already familiar with, but Juxt is cool. Juxt is one of those common functional programming type functions. Here it's a function. This one's a list function. So we'll pick up on that very soon. Thanks for spending your time with me. Tell a friend, and I'll see you when it's time for the J's.